there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle, and it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Wednesday Whimsy is a short show I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game topic, a top 10, or something else that just happens to be on my mind. Well, I was going to do something different today, but then on Saturday, I got an unexpected surprise. A brand new game arrived, one that, had been announced at the beginning of the year, and that I was excited to try. And that game is, Wyrmspan. There you go. That's Wyrmspan spelled with a Y, like it should be. Because it's, new and exciting, and I have a perfect fez for it, although I think I wore that recently, but oh well, forgive me. My regular viewers. I thought we'd dive right in and talk about Wyrmspan. Now I'm going to talk about it as itself first, and then I'll talk about how it compares with another game by the same publisher that is somewhat related. So without much more delay, let's get into our discussion. So what is Wyrmspan about? Well, it is a game about collecting dragons. You're going to have you have this board with 3 caves on it, and you're trying to prepare the caves so that dragons can come and live there, and then ultimately score points for them. There's not a whole lot of theme in Wyrmspan. It's more just it's collecting dragons, and you're really what you're trying to do is generate some sort of a bonus engine, because each of the cards you play, it's going to give you access to some sort of special benefit. And then as a bonus, you can then activate those benefits and get more stuff so that you can do better things later. And ultimately, you're going to kind of set your goal and use these dragons as a means to an end. So how does it work? Well, let's go here to a picture of it. We can zoom in a bit. So it's all going to center around your player board. And your player board has, like I mentioned, these 3 rows, and each one is going to be the home for different types of dragons. You've got, I don't know how many dragon cards. There's at least 200, I'd guess. I could probably look at the rule book here. It says 183, so not at least 200, but it's a good lot, and they're all, as far as I can tell, different. That's kind of an extreme zoom, but you can kind of zoom in here on a dragon, like this caustic worm here. Right, it wants gold and gems. It wants to live in the golden grotto, which is your middle row. It has an activation ability. It can hold an egg, and it's going to be worth some amount of points, but this egg is blocking the view. So on your turn, you have a certain number of coins. You're going to start the round with 6, but it's possible that you could spend them more than 1 per turn. Most actions cost a coin. In fact, all the actions cost a coin as a base cost. So your coins are kind of your action tracker, but some cost more, and sometimes things will give you a coin. So you're going to have at least a few turns every round. You're going to select one of these 4 basic actions. There's excavate, which means to play a cave card. This is a cave card here. And it's free to play, although some of them have, if they're in this 3rd row, they cost an egg. And if they're in the 4th row, they cost 2 eggs. And it's going to give you some sort of a bonus when you play it. Then you could also, or instead, you could entice a dragon, which just basically means you pay the dragon's cost and you put it into the leftmost cave that's been excavated and is ready for the dragon. Sometimes it'll give you a one-time ability. Sometimes it'll give you an end of round or an end of game ability. And more often than not, it'll be one of these little explorer symbols, which will be when activated. And we'll talk about that one next. So the 3rd action you could do is explore. And when you explore, you're going to pick one of your caves. And the first time you explore it, you'll see that there's a 1 coin cost and then a coin and an egg. And then if you do it 3 times in the same round, it'll be 1 coin and 3 eggs. And that's as many as you can do. And then you're just going to kind of start to walk. So your little explorer is going to stop at each spot and gain the bonus that you see there. So this would be to draw a card. This one would be to reveal a card. And if it's a hatchling, you'll tuck it under there, which will be worth points. This will be to move up on a track. This one here doesn't do anything for you. And this one here gets you a card again, and so on, and eggs. And the point, though, is that If you don't have a dragon, like here in this fourth row, you'll see there's a stop sign, which means that the explorer would have to stop at this spot. So by playing the dragons into your den, you're going to be able to do more and more activations when you do the activate action. And so each turn you're going to do one of those three things. There's not a whole lot of rules there. And at the end of the round, there's going to be a scoring. Oops, I'm zoomed way in on that. Let's see if I can find a picture of the scoring tracker. Well, there's a scoreboard over here. You can kind of see it. There will be these goals. This would be to have dragons and cave cards in your Amethyst Abyss, which is your third row. And whoever has the most will get more points than whoever has fewer than the most. You're going to do that 4 times. There's going to be a different thing scored each round. And then at the end of the game, you're going to total up your points. You'll get points for the dragons. You'll get points for the eggs that are on dragons. You'll get points for cards that you've been able to tuck underneath dragons. And sometimes you'll be able to store food on the dragons. And if you do that, well, that's also worth a point. You get points. You might get points from other bonuses. For example, there's this track here. This is that track I mentioned earlier, and as you advance on it, you're going to move around this board, and eventually when you get to the bottom or the top, sort of 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock positions, you can put one of your cubes out here, and there's a couple of them that will score you points. And you'll also get any points that your dragons got you, and that's kind of the game. Not a lot to it. It's pretty straightforward. Let's talk about what makes it special and what may be a drawback. So the first thing that makes the game special is that it's really easy to teach and play. I always like this in games. Look, I've mentioned this before. I love complicated games. I really do. But I teach a lot of games, and teaching a complicated game is a lot more work than teaching a pretty straightforward game. And I really like it when a game is easy to play, yet still fun and enjoyable. It doesn't feel like it's dumbed down to, the lowest common denominator. And that's how Wyrmspan is. It feels like it's fun to play, but the rules and decisions that you're making are pretty easy. They're broken down into fairly straightforward things. Now the game gives you some guidance. I like that. There's the sort of 4 goals. You can work on, you can sort of work on the first round's goal, but you can keep in mind the ones for 2 and 3 and kind of make your decisions so that you're set up for those. You could just look at that dragon board, that dragon guild board, pick one of the scoring things that it gives you. Each one gives you a different way to score points. And you might say, well, you know what? I'm not going to pay as much attention to the end of round goals. I'm going to focus just on this. And I'm going to milk that thing for all it gives you. You could lay eggs because eggs are worth points. Now, interestingly enough, there's no inherent way to lay eggs, just like there's not really a natural way to tuck cards or store food. There are lots of ways to do it. There's lots of effects that let you do it. But in another game, Wyrmspan, there was an action that just lets you do it, and that's sort of been shaved away here. And instead, that has to be something that you have to build toward, which I think is interesting. I like the artwork. There's a bunch of different dragons. Like I mentioned, I think they're all unique. I haven't looked at each and every card, but I believe that they are. And, their effects sometimes are similar. The game comes with this Dragon Almanac that has, it's called Dragon Facts, although, these are obviously not real creatures, but but you can learn a little bit about them. It's also sort of a card list. You can kind of see what they all do. It doesn't really add anything to the game, but it's kind of a fun, extra thing in case that's interesting to you. You can also sort of see what all the dragons look like and pick your favorite one. So I like the artwork. It's whimsical. It's this nice watercolor. It's the same artwork. It's reminiscent of Wyrmspan artwork, in that it's sort of that kind of watercolory picture, but it's definitely unique. The card design and visual clarity is pretty good. You can look at the card immediately, know what it does, know what it's worth, and there's not a lot of clutter on the cards. It's the right amount of artwork to text size to iconography. But it's pretty straightforward and good card design, and everything looks good. What else do I like about it? Well, I like how fun the game is. This is just a really enjoyable game. You always feel like you're getting something in Wyrmspan. When you're playing a card, you're getting something. When you're playing a cave, you're getting something. When you set up that track that you can run all the way to the end, well, you're getting lots of things then. And if you plan it right, what you get here, you might be able to turn into something else here, and it just really can be very satisfying. You just always feel like you're doing something. The game's also not that long. The box says a number on it. It says 90 minutes. Well, if you make the mistake of playing this game with 5 players, I'm sure it would be. But if you play it with 2, it's probably 30 minutes, and it's just a really good. It's not. It doesn't feel like a light float away filler game, but you aren't gonna be playing it all night, which is always welcome. I like the direction that it gives you. I like the artwork. I like the weight. I like how fun it is, and I love the solo mode. This game comes with a solo mode, and the solo mode is one of those perfect solo modes that is just so easy. You're going to flip a card, and it's going to tell you, move this token around this track. That's all this solo player is going to care about. And eventually it'll hit those sort of trigger points. And when it does, it's going to claim a card or two. And when it does that, it gets points. And so it's just the easiest solo mode. Now, I found it a little bit easy on normal difficulty, but I played it on hard, and I found it, it was a decent challenge, a good close game that I lost, but not by a landslide. And there's 2 modes. I haven't tried the Ravel mode. I'm not even sure what that means, but it's a more difficult mode apparently. Uh, I will though. This is the game that I would set up and play. This would be my general conference game. There's like when I'm listening to a long presentation or an audiobook or something. This is the kind of game. It's not mindless, but it's just enough that I can play through it and have something to keep my brain busy so that I can also use split my focus and enjoy both. That's just how my brain works. Or I just play it. I mean, I think this is a great solo game. In fact, if I were to redo my solo game list, top 10 solo games, this one might make it on there, and that's saying something. So, I mean, excellent solo, lots of fun, looks great, easy to teach. There's a lot to love here. So, where's the but? Well, one of the buts is actually not really a gameplay issue, but it's the box. The box, it doesn't come. Wingspan came with a tray for the cards, and this one doesn't. This one just you open all the cards, and I guess you can put them in 3 or 4 bags. Um, I happened to have a 3D printed insert from another game that I had done something else with. And so I have these things, but they barely fit in the box, and they don't really hold the cards very snugly. I don't know why it didn't come with a card tray. That feels like, I always hate it when you open a box and it feels like the game publisher is giving you the middle finger about storage. And that's kind of how this was. It came with a plastic box, came with 2 plastic boxes for the eggs, but then there's a whole bunch of tokens and crap, and that's not nice. I don't like that. I really wish it had come with a thoughtful storage insert, and especially from this publisher that tends to focus on what people want. I don't know why it really got no care in the storage. So there's that. The components are fine. Other than that, I didn't love it came with these little chintzy uh, cardboard tokens, which were very uninspiring. But the publisher sold a nice upgrade kit that you could get fancy wooden resources, and I'm sure I've got these things. It didn't come with these boxes, by the way. I had bought them at a different time. Um, so I mean, I didn't love those. I wish that had been a little nicer. Um, and if you don't like dragons, you might not like this if you just hate the concept. But I will say, if you're looking for a thematic game, this is not gonna be there for you, right? You have dragons, but the dragons are a means to an end in this game. It's not about dragons. It's just sort of using them but it really could have been cars, or building a garage and parking cars in it. It could have been horses. It could have been birds. And so, I mean, the theme is barely there. And again, I'm okay with that. I love lots of games that don't have very strong themes. But if you're looking for sort of this, outgoing adventure where, high fantasy with dragons and knights and stuff, you're going to have to keep going. So those are some of the buts. So where's my final rating, and how does it compare with Wingspan? Wingspan is a game that is, I would say, 90% the same as this. It's from the same publisher. It's just themed with birds instead of dragons. Wingspan has 3 major expansions, and hopefully more coming. We were promised 1 for each continent. We've gotten 3 continents worth. So let's hope they get in gear on that. It has a gigantic box now that holds everything, which is nice. And it's 90% the same game. You still have the 3 rows in Wingspan. You're still playing the cards into the rows. The difference, though, here, one of the differences is that sort of excavation action. You have to use an action to put a cave card in there, which gives you some bonus, which is great, but it does take an extra action. Whereas in Wingspan, if you had the resources and the cave and the resources and the eggs to play the bird, you could just play it, right? That'd be your action. Also, Wingspan is a fixed number of actions per turn. I think you start with 7, then 6, then 5, then 4 over the 4 rounds of the game, whereas this one is going to be variable. If you're able to get more coins, you might have a bigger round, and that's just going to be how it is. Also, Wingspan has this dice tower, and you're going to roll these dice in there, and that'll be the resources that are available. And if you don't see what you need, you're not getting it. Now, there's ways that's mitigated in some of the expansions, and there's a way to kind of re-roll dice. But in general, if it's not there, it's possible the cupboard might be bare when you get there. Whereas in Wyrmspan, there's none of that. You just always pick one of the 4 resources. Or, if something just gives you meat, if a card just gives you a meat, well, that's what it gives you, but you can see that there. But anytime you're going for that top row, which is the resource gathering action, you're guaranteed to get, whatever resource you want, because they're all there. You just pick. So those are kind of the big differences. But other than that, I mean, sort of the rules themselves and the end of round goals. Another big difference is Wingspan has these goal cards, and you kind of pick one at the beginning of the game, and it might get you 3 to 7 points, it might not. And this one doesn't have that. It's kind of replaced by that Dragon Guild board, which has a way to score. And it's that's sort of not that big a change, but a small difference. Anyway, so I give Wingspan a 9. I like Wingspan a lot. I've played a lot of Wingspan, and I love it with its expansions. I think it's a fantastic game that I really love and want to play. I give Wyrmspan a 9.1. I mean, it's also a 9. I like it just a hair better than Wingspan as a base game. Now, once you add the expansions in, Wingspan sort of gains a little bit more momentum. I like sort of all the variety. I love that wild resource. I love the sort of different mat with different bonus actions. But with the base games, I like Wyrmspan ever so slightly better. As a solo game, I like Wyrmspan significantly better. And Wingspan was a great solo, but Wyrmspan is so much cleaner. They took out some of the fiddliness of sort of flipping the cards around and having it score differently each round. No, it's such a perfect. It's a top tier solo mode. If you didn't get it, I love that. So anyway, 9 out of 10. Do you need this if you already have Wingspan? Absolutely not. They're the same game, except for there's a few small differences, and they affect the game. But you don't. If you already have Wingspan and love it, you don't need to buy this. Try it, see if you like it, and then buy it. But it's not different enough that you really need to own both. If you were just going for the base game, I would recommend Wyrmspan over Wingspan. If you want the full experience, well, Wingspan has more. It's got a couple years of of development ahead of Wyrmspan, so it's just going to have more. You don't need both, but I have both, and I like both, and I'll play both. If I want the more sort of complicated experience, it's Wingspan, with its expansions. If I just want to sit down, set it up, and play, it's Wyrmspan. And if I want to play it solo, it's Wyrmspan all the way. Anyway, there you go. It's a high recommendation from me. I really like this game. I really enjoyed it. There's a lot to love here. I think you're going to like it. And that's kind of the end of this episode of Wednesday Whimsy. So I thank you for joining me. I will, hope you get to try Wyrmspan soon. I think it'll be shipping out. I had a pre-order, or an early order. So anyway, I hope you'll be able to try it soon. 9 out of 10 for me. And it's going to bring us to the end of this episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I'm going to wish you safe travels, courage when you need it, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.